You're in charge.
I want that in writing.
Well, only with me and here. You can't be in charge of everything else.
You heard it first. Welcome to another episode of
Try again.
Welcome to another episode of the Lobdell Universe podcast. Today I have my dad with me. Always a fun time. Never know what he's going to talk about. Scared of the stories he's going to tell about me, but you never know.
Oh, dear. Okay.
So let's start with the fact that you were born and raised in the middle of nowhere, New York. You lived in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, most of your life too. What's it like now living in Nashville in the big city? How different is it?
It's completely different. And my pet peeves are Tennessee drivers.
Which most of them probably are not from Tennessee.
Compared to quiet Ohio, quieter still New York. So it's a big change. I like the area. I like our house. I like our neighbors. Antioch is the area that we're in is a small area to get around in. Trouble is, it takes almost 10 minutes with traffic to get to Home Depot.
Which is right across the highway.
Because it isn't very far away, but it's the traffic. So.
Yeah, but it would have taken you almost 10 minutes to go to Home Depot before, in Salem even.
No, it would have been less than 5.
Maybe. Depends on how many lights you get.
And then another thing that I like to...
Because it's probably about the same distance.
We did, me especially, I guess, like to go to the Elks in Salem. Can't do that here.
No, you think about all the things that I don't know if you want to call them luxuries or the special things we had in small town America, because, you think about the country club. We don't have anything like that here. We were talking before we got on here about Nashville Shores, and it's a huge water park. It's not the intimate private club, if you will, that has a lake and no one else has access to. And it's a special little moment in time that nobody has around here.
Correct.
And I still wonder all these years, like, why was it the Corps of Engineers that thought about this back then? Or I forget if it was a private person I thought the Corps of Engineers made that facility or that area or something. I forget.
It probably was, because I think it was like in the 1920s when it started. And that's a long time to be private and still going strong. But like you said, it's completely different than anything that's around here, period.
No, I mean, we were so spoiled. We didn't just have the country club. We had Sevakine. There was probably, I don't know how many little tiny private lake country clubs existed in that area of Ohio that probably don't even exist anywhere in Tennessee practically.
So far, as far as you're saying that, I agree.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling to give all that up for the big city, but at the same time, I mean, we have access to so much stuff now that, I'll put up with Nashville Shores. I mean, even going to the lake. I mean, I'm right here beside the lake now. In Salem, I still had to drive to Berlin if I wanted to go boating, so I still had a 25-minute drive to go to the lake real quick, maybe 20. But it wasn't like right there in front of me. When I first moved here and lived in East Nashville, it was about that long of a drive to go over to Percy Priest and drop in when we were going boating back then. But now I'm so spoiled to be 5 minutes and I'm in the, 10 minutes I'm in the water.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so quick. It's unbelievable how much different it is to have the lake right here. But I will admit there's nothing better than the Salem Country Club. I mean, that is forever the one thing I will always miss. If I had it my way, I would have bought that property, built my house on it, and had complete control over it and lived there for the rest of my life. I mean, that would be paradise for someone that lives in the middle of nowhere, Ohio, right there.
Mm-hmm. So in the back of your mind, you're going to miss it and still do, or whatever?
Oh, all the time. I mean, that's about the only thing I miss about being there. I mean, in all reality, I have everything else here I could possibly imagine. I just don't have that private lake with that beautiful sand and the cool, Tarzan swing and everything like that. The fishing lake. I mean, that fishing lake, I know every little detail of where to catch whatever I want to catch. I'm at Percy Priest now and I can't catch anything except for the tiniest little bluegill unless I'm lucky. It's just such a different mindset to understand fishing, let alone just the activities and the 4th of July being there and all that kind of stuff. All those things. That's the one thing I miss about small town community, but I still would never give up the big city for all of that again.
And when you mention them things, I remember many times 4th of July when I worked there with the traffic control. The number of cars that we parked in there for 4th of July fireworks, I don't remember exactly how many, but I'm going to say close to 1,000 cars parked in there. And it was unbelievable how easy it was to get them all out of there. Because I had Don Yeasted when he worked for me out there one summer for 4th of July. He helped park cars, and then we got to rest and wait out till the fireworks are over. And then he says, he's told me how we're going to get all these cars out of here. I said, Don, I want you to go sit on the corner of the porch in a chair and just stay there. And I was down by the guard shack sitting. We didn't have to do anything. And when all the cars were out, he come down to me and he says, I don't believe it. There was no accidents, nobody yelling, no horns tooting.
Never.
But all of them cars and all them people in a certain amount of time got to leave.
Yeah. You had to be patient, but I mean, they were used to it. And, once you leave there, it's a 5-minute drive home. It's not like they have another hour to go home like you would if you did something like that here. We still have struggled to find the best way to go watch the 4th of July or anything like that here. Downtown has one of the biggest 4th of July celebrations in the country, and we still don't want to go down there to watch it. It's too much chaos. There's 500,000 people down there. We're talking about 1,000 people, and here we're gonna go watch fireworks with 500,000 people. I mean, it's chaos. It's totally insane. There's no way. To your same point, it's the exact opposite. There's nothing but horns blaring and people stuck. I went to one concert with Nicole. I forget what concert we went to, and we were coming out of the parking garage, and it took us an hour. It took us 45 minutes at least to get out of the parking garage alone.
Wow.
Just to get out of there, just so we could get out of the town. Not in getting out of the town, just getting out of the parking garage to get out of the town. Mm-hmm. Because of all the cars coming out at the same time. And you go to a concert at like Bridgestone, you're talking like 25,000 people. I still don't understand exactly why it was so bad that day to leave. There are moments in Nashville where you have a football game, so you got 70,000 people there. You got a hockey game, so there's another 25,000 people there, plus the tourism that's going on, plus a concert at the Ryman and stuff like that. You could easily have 250,000 people down there, and all leaving at one time potentially, and it's a nightmare. Where you don't have that in small town, but you also have to drive all the way up to Cleveland or Pittsburgh. You have a good hour and a half drive to go see a concert. So I have a 20-minute drive to go see a concert with a heck of a horrible experience getting out of it. Mm-hmm. Or I have to drive an hour and a half anyway just to get to the concert and go back, not including getting out of the town.
Well, I never went to any concerts, so I never had that problem.
Oh, yeah. It was a problem.
And I don't plan on going into a concert down here because I don't think that Kingston Trio is going to be playing in this area forever.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen. Although, I mean, Nicole and I did go see Willie Nelson live. It was his birthday celebration, and I think he's doing that again. I don't think he's doing it in Nashville this year, though. But there's moments like that, like when you went to see the George Jones funeral tribute or whatever that was. There's things like that you still might go to.
I went to the George
That's why I'm
Jones
saying that. The funeral. And that was
celebration of life.
Was that at the Grand Ole Opry House?
The new.
Yeah, the one out by the Opry Mills.
Yes.
Opryland, yeah. That's a great place. It's not really new anymore. It's been there for a while, but it is a really nice place to go see a concert. So you'd be surprised. You may go to a few more. But you went to the Grand Ole Opry a couple of times, didn't you?
Yes, at the Ryman.
Yeah.
We've been to the Ryman twice.
You just never went to the actual Opry House itself?
Not for a show.
Okay, just for that one, for George Jones.
Yeah.
I've been there twice now for concerts. Yeah, it's a pretty good place.
And it was impressive how many people went into the George Jones tribute and how much room there was still left in there. I was impressed with that because there was a line probably an hour just to get in there to sit down. And we were at the end, and when we got in there, we could almost put that many people in it again. There's not much room left.
I wonder if it's because they turned some people down or what they decided to do, how they handled that. That's weird.
I don't know that, but I just know that the line was long.
Of course, a line looks like a lot more people than you realize because I know the Ryman's like 3,500 people, so that's more people than you realize standing outside.
Well, but it was impressive. And the show at the Ryman was good too, both of them. And one of the things that impressed me about I think it was the second show at the Ryman, we were in the middle area, back a ways, and they made a tribute to the Code Talkers from World War II. I think there were 6 of them there that are still alive from World War II. And I was impressed with that they honored them. Because a lot of people don't know the Code Talkers or what it was about, so it was interesting.
Were they actually at the show? Or
Yes, they were about 4 rows in front of us, and
Wow.
all lined up but together.
I mean, what's the chances? What were they doing in Nashville to be at the Ryman for the Grand Ole Opry show at
Don't
that
know
exact
that.
moment that you happened to be there? That's
Don't
really
know
interesting.
that. Just coincidental.
Did you get to talk to him at all, or
No.
you just saw him?
No. Yep.
Now, refresh my memory. What war was that?
World War II. They were stationed somewheres in the Pacific area because the Japanese could not break the Navajo language code, which is why they were called Code Talkers. And they were spread all over the Pacific, and they got messages back and forth, and it made a big difference in the war, I think.
Would have been a lot easier if they just had cell phones back then, huh?
Yeah, well, a little bit before that.
Would they use ham radios?
They used some kind of wireless radio signals, like you say. I'm assuming ham because that can go a long distance with ham.
Right.
So it was great.
That's cool. I still have never understood completely the difference between a ham radio and a CB radio, because I messed around more with CB radios growing up, and you were messing around with ham radios growing up.
Well, there's a big difference in the frequency. Ham is like a lower frequency than CBs.
And why is that?
I don't know why. That's just...
Come on, Mr. Know-It-All. You're supposed to know all this.
No, I don't know it all. Just a little bit, that much. But anyways, it was kind of neat. So that was just one of the things I remember from the Ryman.
Yeah, sure. No, that's amazing. They always have some kind of tributes when they do those shows as much as they possibly can, because they do so many shows. I mean, they do Thursday through Sunday every single.
Oh, they've added more, I think, now in the last few years.
Maybe. It's amazing to think about. That is one of the hardest things for me when I moved to Nashville was I don't even really care that much about country music at all. I've never been to the Grand Ole Opry show. I could care less, to be honest with you, for the most part. But to have access to so much music here and to have everything here, like we talked about this years ago, how I had a chance to possibly thought I was going to have a chance to get, what was it, Chet Atkins autograph or.
Well, that's what I wanted you to get, because I had an album
Right.
with Chet Atkins and Les Paul.
Yeah. And I almost had a chance, and just the idea that you have those opportunities here is pretty overwhelming. To think about all of the major songwriters and musical acts that are still here from every generation. Doesn't matter how old or how young you are, everybody's coming here, everybody lives here, everybody wants to be here, everybody records here. For going for years not having access to much music, I definitely have done the best I can to make up for all of those years from living in. I mean, because even when I moved to Savannah, I was still too far away for concerts to come through there very often for bigger names. Like every once in a while, there was something that would go through there, but nothing to the level of what we have here. Like I know you don't care, and I don't care either, but Taylor Swift was here just a couple weeks ago, and when they sold those tickets, she shut down Ticketmaster. That's how important she was. That's how big of a name she is. And she did 3 shows here, 3 nights in a row, and sold all 3 of them in minutes, and stuff like that. And tickets were going. There's a guy that spent like $20,000 on 4 tickets and stupid things like that because it was so important for their kids to go see him and all. And it's a once in a lifetime almost, which is not. She's young. She's going to be touring for the rest of her life. I mean, she's got a long ways to go. But yet this town blew up so big, it became the Taylor Swift weekend. The kids, they canceled school on Friday because of it. They took that as a day off, because they didn't have to worry about it from the winter, because there was that many teachers going to see the concert, and wasn't going to go to school that day to work. So then instead of bringing in substitutes for the entire day, they literally just shut down the school for a day. That's how big Taylor Swift is to the rest of the world, except for the 2 of us sitting here right now. It's crazy to think about.
And and was a lot on Facebook and stuff like that the records she set and how important it was to, like you said, young girls especially.
Yeah.
More so than boys, I think. But yeah, I read about on Facebook a lot about the records she set, and then some of the stuff the records won't ever be broken because it was so bad, so high she was.
Yeah, I hope somebody breaks it because I can't imagine Taylor Swift having a record. That just doesn't make any sense to me.
Well,
the music isn't good enough for all these records. Sorry, Taylor Swift. I know you're not listening, but regardless, not that big of a fan.
Okay. All right, moving on. What's next?
Well, we were last time we were talking. We were talking about your time in the military. So you were in the Navy, and you were stationed. What did you say, in Rhode Island, right? In Newport, Rhode Island.
Newport, Rhode Island. Naval Hospital.
Was Newport, Rhode Island a big town, small town?
Pretty big. A lot of city people spent summers there because there were some big old mansions there. Matter of fact, one time we seen Kennedy's private boat from the shore that we were there for whatever reason going by. And to me, it was good duty. I liked to work at the hospital. And mainly because I was a Navy medic, because that's what I was tested for, and they told me that was what I should be doing, and I did. And I got transferred from Great Lakes to Newport, Rhode Island.
Great Lakes?
Great Lakes Training Center, where I took boot camp and medical school.
Where's that at?
Great Lakes, Illinois.
Oh. Well, when I think of Great Lakes, I think of the Great Lakes. Was it on the lakes or?
It was on one of the side of one of the Great Lakes. I don't remember which one without looking on the map.
Huron or whatever's right there in Chicago, like the Chicago area.
Chicago area. Yeah.
Okay.
Because we went there a few weekends for a weekend off when we were during going to school, just to be something different. So we'd take a train ride from the school on a train ride. I think it would be down to Chicago.
Did you go to Chicago much while you were there?
Not just like I said, for a couple weekends. That's the only time I was in Chicago.
Because the one thing, I mean, I've been to Chicago a few times. You want to talk about a big city? Now
Yeah.
that's intimidating.
Yep.
That's extremely big. It's overwhelming how big that place is. I love it, but wow. I mean, you can get lost in, the Nashville's not even barely a suburb of the scale of Chicago.
Yep.
It's amazing. So you went from Great Lakes and then you went to Newport right from there?
Well, I went to boot camp there, and then I went to school there, and then I stopped on the way home going to Newport.
So when you say you went to school for being the medical,
Yep.
so that was all at Great Lakes. So you finished boot camp, and then they said you're not going to go somewhere else right now. You're going to stay here and take this training.
Right.
Does everybody do that, or do a lot of people go to other?
Oh, yes, because once you go to boot camp, and sometime when you're doing that, you get tested for your ability to do things in your future. And I don't know how many was in our class, but everybody probably got someplace else. There's schools for here, schools for this. Some guys were just sent to a place to serve.
Right.
So like a fort or
And just move on with their little group.
and they go
platoon.
and do their job, which might not be medical. It might be run a bulldozer or something for the Navy.
Right. Interesting. So then how long were you at the Great Lakes? Like how long was that training, that classes?
The Great Lakes, I don't remember how long because I got to Newport probably in 1960, went in at 59, finished boot camp by the end of 59 because I went in September. And then the first month, we'll say, of 60, I was in the medical school. And probably on 61, I was in Newport, Rhode Island.
Wow. Big changes.
For 2 years.
Yeah. You stayed in Newport for 2 years?
Yep. Working at the hospital. And I got transferred to the Marines in South Carolina.
Okay.
So,
What do you mean you got transferred to the Marines?
well, I had to go down there to go to, it's called Fleet Marines because I was Navy with the Marines because they don't have any medical staff of their own. So it was a special, I don't know how long, we'll say 2 months, training, special just for Navy medics that are in the Marines. We got a whole Marine Corps sea bag except for the dress blues. We wore the dress regular uniform as a Marine, but it had a medical insignia on the collar so that they could tell us apart. And then you'd have your rank on your arm and everything like that. So it was kind of different, but it was interesting. And I went into the Navy at almost 200 pounds, come out of boot camp like 165.
Wow.
I don't know how I would look now if I weighed 165 because I'm going down from 200 too. So.
I can't imagine, because you were what, 18 years old, 20 years old at that point?
And I was 19 when I went in the Navy. So because I was born in May, So that was 6 months later or so. And then I was in
You're good. I'm just adjusting this while you talk.
I was in the medical school when I turned 60 in May, and then I was turned 61 in Newport, Rhode Island. So, but Newport, Rhode Island is a medium-sized town, I'm going to call it.
Right.
But I do remember certain things about it. And I talked to you about putting something in worldwide Facebook. He says I can't do that, but I would like to be able to go out to the United States or whatever and ask anybody that they remember some of the things that I did. And there was a bunch of us medical corpsmen worked at the hospital. We started a coffee shop. And right next door to the coffee shop was a restaurant bar called Birdland. So one of our smarter hospital corpsmen for this coffee shop decided to call it the Purple Egg. So I was wondering through the United States, because they're not going to be listening to this, but worldwide, does anybody out there remember the Purple Egg?
So that means that everybody that does watch this video has to share it to the world to find out if anybody you know happens to remember a place called the Purple Egg in Newport, Rhode Island.
Yep.
In 1961?
Yeah. And
1961. I'm sure all of you out there listening remember 1961.
Well, okay. And another comment about because I was with the Marines, there was a time, and I don't remember the time, but our whole base, everybody that was traveling with us, went on board ship to go down to the Caribbean to do practice, landing, and going up the side of a ship on them rope ladders in case we ever get called into wartime to do that. Well, we never made it down to where we were going because the Cuban crisis started. And the Russians wanted to send rockets to Cuba, and I'm assuming potentially to attack the U.S. maybe, I don't know. But anyways, President Kennedy says, that's not a good idea. So we started what was called the Cuban blockade, and a bunch of Navy ships went around the...
Took little paddles and paddled their way there.
Went around the island for I don't know how long it was. And I was on one of them ships, and we had all our stuff on board ship to land on beaches. Because I remember down in the hold of the ship, there was tanks in there. And it was, if everybody remembers the old type movies where you see ships going up to a beach and the front goes down and a tank drives out. That's what we had with us. And thank goodness that Khrushchev decided to turn his ships around and they sent them back to Russia. So it was very interesting, and we didn't really have any shipboard duties as Navy medic with the Marines. So we just had to entertain ourselves while we're driving around Cuba in a boat. Played a lot of double-deck pinochle. And one of the things I remember that stands out, one of our guys in our group was a tobacco chewer. He run through all the chewing tobacco in ship stores because he bought it and chewed it up. Then he started buying boxes of cigars. Mm-hmm. He used cigars as chewing tobacco.
That is not the same thing.
Not the same thing, but he did it. Yeah, Yucca's right. But that was just one of the things I remember on board ship.
But was he getting those cigars from Cuba?
Oh, I don't know where they came from.
I mean, those are very special cigars. They were, not allowed to. I don't know if they were not allowed to be exported to us for decades after that. I don't know if they're allowed to now or not. I want to say they are, but I don't think so. I don't think they're illegal in the States, but I don't think they're sold to the States. Something like that now. I think you can bring them over. Before, you couldn't even bring them. If you went to Cuba, you couldn't even bring them back. But I think you're allowed to now. I'm not sure.
Another thing that I remember.
Don't quote me on that.
Another thing that I remember on board ship, riding around Cuba, it was kind of hot down there. And if you can just imagine of trying to sleep with just your pillow, fully dressed, up on the steel deck.
Like outside on the steel deck?
Outside on the steel deck.
And because that was the coolest place to sleep?
Coolest place. I was younger then, it's easier to sleep, but I remember doing that because it was so hot down below.
They didn't have fans for you back then?
No. Because there were so many, there was more than just our group on board this. It was a troop ship. It was my second ship.
So when you say that you were, let me try to make sure I wrap my head around this because I'm still confused about this. You went into the Navy. The Navy transferred you to the Marines and then put you on a Navy ship. So at the point that you were on the ship in Cuba, were you a naval officer or a Marine officer?
I was both.
How? Is that normal?
Yep. When the medical department of the Marines uses Navy personnel, there are Navy personnel assigned to the Marines. And the Marines don't like really to admit, but I got called Doc a lot of times by the Marines because I was just a plain medic. I wasn't a doc, but the Marines relied a lot, especially in Vietnam, we're going to use for an example, for medical care, service, emergencies.
Right.
Out in the field or whatever.
Interesting. So, okay. How do I ask this question? All right, so you said that when you were on the ship, your only duties was medical.
No.
Okay. That's what I wanted to clarify because you said you had nothing to do. Like, some guys have to like clean certain things or some guys have to cook or, there's all these different roles that everybody has on the ship. If your role was only medical, then you had nothing to do because you never actually went to war.
Correct.
So did you have other duties because of that?
No.
That was your only duty. So you just got to sit
We
around.
didn't have any medical duties per se because there was nothing for us to do medically wise.
Right.
Because we were waiting for either something to happen or go back to where our port was.
Right. So, unless like somebody, cut themselves cooking or something like that, you didn't have anything. So did the other troops get annoyed by the fact that you had no responsibilities, or did they just, it is what it is because that's your role?
No idea about that part. Because if one of us or somebody that was on board ship got cut, they went to the ship's first aid doctors. They didn't go to us.
Oh, really?
No. No. Because we weren't allowed to do that.
Unless it was actually at war.
Yes.
Wow. I never really thought about it that way. So, because I assumed Marines had their own doctors in one way or another. You were more.
They had Navy doctors.
But they always have Navy doctors. So even the guy that was the in-house doctor for them that you just mentioned.
Yep.
That was still a Navy one. It's just you were not part of that team.
Correct.
Okay. Huh. So how long were you stuck on this boat?
That I don't remember. I'd have to go look somehow in my records to find out when I got transferred from the Marines to discharge.
Sure.
So I don't know how long we were on board ship riding around Cuba. I don't know how long that was.
But you don't know if it was weeks or months?
No.
Okay, just curious.
I do know that they made a movie about what was going on at the White House during the Cuban crisis. It's a movie called 13 Days about President Kennedy and the other Kennedy and all the officials in Washington. And it's an interesting movie. If anybody's interested, called 13 Days.
Did you get time off at all while you were there? Did you get to go to Cuba?
No.
So you never left the boat the entire time?
No. No.
Wow.
Not till we went back to port where we left from, close to where we were doing our duty as a Marine.
So there's so many people out there that love going to Puerto Rico and Cuba and all those islands out there, and you were right there and you never even got to experience 1 minute of it.
Weren't allowed at that particular time.
Right. So that means it wasn't as long as you would think it was, because there's got to be a limit to where they would have given you a little bit of time off if you would have been out there for, say, I'm exaggerating, but say you were out there for 2 years. They would have had to have transitioned people and given you time off. So it had to have been only a couple months to where they didn't have to worry about that, or they just don't care whatsoever. I don't know how the military works.
Well, in the situation of possible
Crisis.
then you don't get leave or time off.
Okay.
So you have to stay on board ship as long as you're out there running around. And then you don't get any time off till you get back into your port that you left from.
Interesting. That is crazy. I've always wondered how that kind of stuff worked. And so you never actually saw, I mean, that's the closest you ever got to war then.
Yes.
And then after you got done with that, were you done? So after that was done and you went back to port, were you done with the military, or were you still there?
I think I had some more time left to do to the end of my tour.
That's what I mean, yeah.
After the Cuban crisis, but I would have to check my records, which I don't have in my head of.
Because we all remember every little moment of our lives, don't we?
Nah. Not everything. I remember a few things about you.
Uh-oh.
But that's another subject.
Yeah. We'll pick another day to talk about your son the entire time, because that's what we want to talk about all the time.
So anyways, I got out of the military, went back to my hometown of Deposit, New York, went to work at a grocery store, which is a big difference than medical stuff.
Yeah, I bet.
And I worked for AMP in the little town. Worked the produce department. Worked Dairy Queen. I can remember I was in charge of cutting. We used to get cheese in about 2-foot diameter cheeses. And one of my jobs was to cut that up into pieces and wrap it in plastic and wear it and mark it for price.
I don't think I could do that.
I remember doing it quite a few times. And
As much as I can't stand cheese, I don't even like to touch it. I don't even think I could even cut it for somebody else to touch. I think it would drive me crazy.
well,
But that's my own little
I don't
quirks.
I don't have a cheese fetish or distaste.
As I say, it's not a fetish. Far from
So
it.
there's a difference between us.
Yes. Okay, so you worked at a grocery store. You worked at, what'd you say, Dairy Queen?
No, the dairy department
Dairy department.
of the grocery store.
That's why there's cheese there, of course, because that comes from dairy
Yeah,
and other moldy things.
yeah. Moldy things, huh?
So why did you move from there to Ohio?
Well, at the time, my father-in-law was working for Chrysler in Twinsburg, Ohio. And we've been corresponding, my first wife and I corresponding to get me a job there.
So was she living in New York also?
She was in Ohio when your mother was separate than
Yeah.
my first wife.
I'm talking about your first wife. I know.
Her name was Bonnie.
Yes.
And she was from Ohio, close to Salem. She graduated from Greenford in '61. And we moved back and rented an apartment. And I'm going to say less than a month later, I went up to Chrysler with an application and started working, which was in, 63, something like that. I worked there 35 and a half years.
I was going to say it was 35 years. I could probably do the math backwards if I had to. So when you started working at Chrysler, you told me before that you also were a bartender. So like, why did you need to do both?
Well, after being at Chrysler for a while, I got a divorce. And I lived in an apartment, and of course, a divorcee guy never had enough money because he's paying for his wife and kids that live someplace else. So I worked part-time as a bartender in Salem, Ohio.
Did you make decent money being a bartender?
Fair.
Better or worse than working at Chrysler?
Oh, a lot worse.
I mean, if you did it full time, it was still worse?
Yes.
Okay.
I would never imagine working full-time bartending and not working at Chrysler. Because once I was at Chrysler, after a time working in the press room as a press operator, then I applied for an apprenticeship to become a skilled trade person. I went to school for that and got that and made a lot more money. And then I used to go to what's called Taylor's Coffee Shop in Salem. And I worked for the ambulance company. And I'd stop in there, both of us that worked in the ambulance would stop in there for lunch a lot. And I got to know one of the waitresses pretty good. So when I started working, or maybe I was then, I don't know, working at the bar. So one night I'm bartending.
At the coffee shop?
At the bar.
Okay.
Working at the bar. It's called Happy Days. And Jim Suzik was the owner. And he was in the band. And his
Now,
wife
is this
sang.
the same Happy Days from the TV show?
Yeah, different Happy Days.
Sorry. I didn't even
But anyways, I'm bartending. And it's a Saturday night. Band's playing. Place is full. And this lady, Peg, I think her name was Peg, from the coffee shop, came in with two young ladies that were divorced, that were widows at the time. And one of them's name was Sheila. The other one's name was Jackie. So we all got to talking, and Sheila and I got to talk about, we both had two daughters at the time. We didn't have a son. So that was a nice thing, and it worked out. We were good for each other, it seemed, to start with. So I went home and called her again, and we spent some time together. Eventually we got married.
Crazy.
So we met in
Happy Days.
We met in Happy Days. I think it was 1950, I think. No, 1970 in August or something like that. And spent a lot of time together. And next July 7th, we got married. And in 74, you were born. 74, Rick was born. So that...
She got married around 72.
71 or 72, I can't remember.
I think
which.
it would have been 72. And then you went to Hawaii for your honeymoon, because if you think back 9 months for me, that puts it a little over a year being married before I was on my way.
Okay.
I don't think it was more than that from what Mom has told me, but I could be wrong. It should be right around there, yeah.
Yeah, sometimes
Well, would have last year have been your, what would that be, 50th anniversary? Was that last year?
uh, 50 and 72 is 22,
That's why I'm saying that. They were in 23.
whatever.
So was it last year or the year before? You should remember your 50th anniversary. It just happened. Was it last year or the year before?
Year before,
Okay,
quite a few years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Then it was 71. That's why I'm saying that.
I'm not good at dates,
And luckily your son's good at math
and handy to have around sometimes.
sometimes,
Not always.
except for when we're doing a podcast.
Oh, well, wait till you try to get your mother sitting here. She's told me in the
work on
car
that.
she's not doing this.
It's okay.
And I says, well, it's just like you and I talking in the car. No difference.
No, just someone's recording it.
I'm not doing that.
There's no difference.
Well,
But
better-
getting her to sit still for more than 10 minutes is hard enough to do as it is.
if you ever get to do that, congratulations, because I don't know how you're going to do that.
So you were hanging out at a coffee shop in Salem,
Taylor's Coffee Shop, yeah.
and you
Not
were
there anymore.
Yeah, of course.
There's a funeral home there.
Oh, really? And you said you were working with an ambulance service also at the time,
Yep, Gold Cross.
and was that like volunteer, or was that paid?
Paid.
So that was paid. So you were working at Chrysler, you were bartending, and you were working an ambulance service all at the exact same time.
Not so much as bartending and ambulance at the same time.
Well,
The same time period, but not at the same days or weeks. you know.
but you were doing all three at one time, not in
Yeah.
the same moment. But I
Yeah,
mean,
yep.
in the same week, you might bartend one night, you might be at the ambulance service one night, and you worked Chrysler all day.
Something like that.
That's three jobs at one time
And
in the
when I met your
1960s.
when I met your mother, she wasn't too happy that I was working so much.
Right, that's why I'm asking all these
So we
questions.
went to a lawyer friend of hers to see if I could do something with my money and income. And he listened to what we told him, and he says, "You can't do that. You can't work 3 jobs." So that helped me quit that. But he just had a fit that I was working that much.
Well, yeah, anybody would have a fit that you're working that much. That's why I'm asking 20 questions. I mean, I have a fit that I was working as much as I did just one job, because I was working 6-7 days a week for years and stuff like that, trying to keep my business going. I couldn't imagine adding another job. I mean, I know when in the later years of you working at Chrysler, you were doing 10-hour days, 7 days a week half the time.
A lot.
So I couldn't imagine adding more to your schedule.
And working that much took a lot away from home life.
Right.
But I don't think I ever missed any of your wrestling matches.
I don't think you did either. I don't know how you didn't, but I mean, they were evening and you were working day. I mean, I remember there were moments you were working night shift too, but it wasn't, I don't remember it being very often or for very long periods of time.
I didn't like night shift because being a light sleeper, I have trouble sleeping during the day.
Sure, me too. Absolutely.
So it was better for me to sleep at night. And then if I'm working 7 days at Twinsburg, then I would never answer the call to the ambulance company when she called for help
Right,
because there was no time for it.
right. So how did you transition all of that into volunteering for the police department then?
That came later, quite a bit later. I was no longer with the ambulance company at the time. So the police department was a volunteer organization called the Police Auxiliary. And my father was in law enforcement too because he was a small town judge in the evenings in Sydney, New York. And that's when we were living in New York at the time. And then when I went to Salem, I went to volunteer for the Salem Police Department and got a uniform and rode in police cruisers with the officers. And at one time I went to police school. You have to go to school to be allowed to carry a weapon in uniform or otherwise. So I did that, and I could carry a revolver and then eventually a pistol in uniform.
So, but yet you were still auxiliary.
Yep.
So you had to go through police training even to still be donating your time even
Correct.
after that.
Correct.
It's interesting how they do that.
Now, a few times, because I was armed and in uniform, I had the opportunity to work like basketball games in uniform. I got paid for that by the school, but not by the auxiliary.
Interesting.
And another thing that I did when I was with the auxiliary, and I got paid for this, I learned to be a dispatcher at the police department. So I would work at that sometimes too, when I didn't make too much, but the city paid me to be a dispatcher after training.
Would that be considered also auxiliary time, or they were separate? It wasn't doubling down on doing both.
They were separate because you had to put so much auxiliary time in per month, but you weren't allowed to count dispatcher time.
Yeah, that's why I was asking.
Because that's getting paid, and I wasn't allowed to count basketball game time because I was getting paid, so that had to be separate.
Which really, if you think about it, those kind of things really helped you get to know Salem, Ohio even better.
Correct.
Behind the scenes, you know, connections all over the town for about anything you can pretty much imagine back then.
Yep.
Interesting. Even to the point of like making sure your son doesn't get into trouble, right?
I did a few things like that, and I talked to a judge a few times about what my son did. And I told the judge, I said, I don't think he's doing anything too bad because I have my fellow officers of the police department keeping an eye on him. I did tell that to the judge.
Yeah, that might be another episode just to talk about that right there.
Okay.
All right. Well,
I had to go to court with him. That's why I remember that.
Well, yeah, but you went to court with me for something that I still don't believe was me anyway. That's a different conversation.
Okay.
For that speeding ticket that
Yep.
doesn't make any sense to me because it wasn't my car, but they wouldn't listen. I don't
know.
understand any of that. You know,
They listened to the officers who even said on the report that the ticket they filled out for you, they gave you as checking your speed by air.
right, by a helicopter, because you can do that, and now you're not allowed to do that. That is actually like something that they can't do anymore.
They hit a stopwatch going from point A to point B, and how long it took tells them how fast you're going.
Right.
Well, they didn't put that on the report. They put something else on there, and the wrong colored vehicle and everything.
Right.
So
And
it's
we still
interesting.
couldn't fight it. And coincidentally, of all the moments in history, which all of it is a good conversation for next time too, is that the same cop that helped me through my accident totaling the LeBaron is the one that pulled me over.
Uh-huh.
What's the chances
I know.
of not even being, I mean, I guess they're close to the same area, but I don't even know how that's possible to be,
Coincidental.
you know, I mean, just unbelievable chance. And he didn't care whatsoever. So, or he did, and that's why he wrote wrong things in. I don't know.
I don't
It's
know
still
either.
confusing. Well, is there anything else you want to say this afternoon?
I'm waiting on your next question or the next podcast.
Yeah, we'll wait till next time. I think we have enough for today.
Okay.
So let's say bye to everybody. Have a good afternoon,
See you next time.
and we'll find out what more I can come up with to ask him next time. Have a good day.
Okay.